Okay, so the thing that we need to keep in mind here as we start talking about objects is that everything that we're going to be dealing with um, in JavaScript are can be thought of as objects. Okay, whether we're talking about text, whether we're talking about numbers, whether we're talking about dates, whether we're talking about specific elements of the website, really everything is an object um, in JavaScript. And as I kind of put here in your overview of the instructions, is that objects have two parts. They have properties and they have methods. And properties can be thought of as the values that are associated with a specific object. So this might be if we're talking about a website, an element on the website, it might be the size of the element, the color of the element. So these would be thought of as attributes, as what we've been talking about so far. And then methods are things that it can do. And we've kind of seen that to some extent with regards to like animation or movement with CSS. But we're going to be experimenting with lots of different things that you can do. And basically anything that we can, if we combine think about if we combined a bunch of animation, a bunch of transitions, transformations, translations, etc., and we created some movement, well, we could then make that or a function that created that movement a method of a specific object. And so this is something that really allows you to do whatever it is that you want with regards to how a website works. So let's go in here and I'm going to remove this and get started with our lesson. Okay. And so what we're going to do here is the first part of the assignment is we're going to create an object that we're going to call a person, and we're going to give it four properties, okay? And so this is where we can start off. We've already done this sort of in cascading style sheets, right? We create a label with attributes, and we say this is going to be red, and this can be underlined, and this can be 20 pixels. So we're going to just create a brand new object that we're going to call a person object. And the way that we're going to do that, we've already kind of talked about this with regards to variables. First off, we're going to create a function, and we're going to call it create info. And we do our little curly Q brackets. Now, all of this is within the script tags, right? So then we're going to say var person, and that's what we've done in order to create a object. And the reason they know it's an object as opposed to a string or a number is because we're going to give it some properties. And you're going to see what we're going to do with this here in a second, but just follow this syntax. Var means establishing that it's a variable, person equals, and then we do the curly Q because this is a way for us to, in a very easy to read way, create the properties. So we're going to give it the first name, and this is called camelback, remember, where it starts off small case, but then in the middle it's uppercase, and that's just a naming convention. But remember that JavaScript is case sensitive. So we're going to say first name equals John, okay? And then we're going to separate our properties with commas. So then last name equals Doe. We're going to say the age equals 50. Now, none of these are reserved names. These are all things that we just created. We're creating these methods on the fly. All right, so let's take a look here. And we see that I've created a var person. Just review. I have my properties set up here in this curly Q bracket, and then I create my document, get element by ID first, inner HTML, person equals first name. So now what it's doing is it's taking this object that I created and it's pulling, in this situation, the property called first name from the person. And I click save show web page, click that, and I get my first answer here. Now I can do the other ones pretty easily, right? All I have to do here is change this. What is the ID that I want to change? What is the ID that I want to change down here? In this case, I called this last. And this is all populated for you. And then I want to pull the property, last name. And then my last one that I'm going to do is age. You see here I have an ID called age. Now these don't have anything, the things down here don't have anything to do with what I call them up here. Obviously this is called first, that's called first name. It's just completely what I decide to call it. And then age here. So click Save and Show Web Page. Click X. And what it does is it, using something that we've already learned, the Get Element by ID inner HTML function, I'm able to change that information. All right, so that's, number one is you created a person object and you gave it 4 properties, and then you're populating the table with the person properties. And then the last thing I want you to do here, which is pretty cool, and this is where you can start seeing things coming together, is I'm going to have you create a function and have that be a method as part of this defining this object. So rather than just giving it an adjective or a property, what I want you to do is create a function that now is going to be associated with this object. In the same way that a car has properties like it's yellow, that's its color, it's 6 feet tall, that's its height. Well, it also has methods, and that's things that the car can do, like the car can drive, or the car can park, or the car can back up. And what we can do now is we can say that we can create all sorts of objects, and then we can tell them what to do on the page. So then rather than programming it from scratch every time, we have these sort of unique things that we can start to work with. Okay, and we'll start getting into that a little bit later. But so right now, what we want to do is create this function or this method. And so we're going to create something called full sentence. Okay, I'm just making that up, but you see what I'm doing here is I'm saying that this has its own function. So I'm going to say function, and I create my, this is, remember how we create the functions, and then I create my own little curly cues here, space them in a little bit. And here's where I'm going to put my function stuff. So what I'm going to do here is say document get element by ID object info, which is an ID that a paragraph ID that I created down below, inner HTML. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to take all the information that's been sent me, this first name, right? So it's going to grab the first name of the variable or the object that is in this function, plus space plus this. Wait a minute. All right, got to remember. Let's move this down here. So we say this first name plus, then it creates a space, right? And then it says is, or this, hold on. This last name plus space is plus, and then you say this age plus space years old. Okay? So what we're doing here is we're saying, in this situation, we're saying replace the inner HTML from this object info ID with this first name, which in this case is John, this last name, which in this case is Doe, is plus this age, 50, and then plus quote space. So everything that's inside the quotes is just going to be static text, but these are going to be variables that are drawn from this object. Okay. Now this can be a little confusing when we talk about it in abstract, but when we start manipulating data, when we start talking about strings and dates and numbers and what are the properties and methods, you're going to see how it works. I just want you to see that you can create objects. You don't just have to use the ones that are given to you, okay? So I'm going to click. If we see down here, all of this is going to show up here in this object info. It's going to replace hello with the function that I just did. And how does that get called? It gets called because when I click the create info, it's going to run this function. So actually I have to call this right here. I'm calling another function. And so I say person full sentence, just like I call it when I do an on click. So when I click this button down here, to create an info, it's going to go run this. It's going to create this object, and then it's going to run these functions, right? So it's going to replace the inner HTML, replace the inner HTML, replace the inner HTML, run this method of the person object, which is a function, which is called full sentence, document get element, and then it's going to replace that. All right, so let's see if that worked. Perfect. All right. So what I want you to do is follow the sample code very carefully and do this assignment. And then in the next lesson, you're going to get a chance to just practice with some of these event triggers. All right. Good luck.